All right, this is part 2 of the mid-year exam review, and we were in Unit 2, so I'm going to continue. In Unit 2, we learned about integers. We learned to add them, subtract them, and multiply. When you add, if the signs are the same, you just keep it and add. If the signs are different, you subtract and take the sign of the majority. So if the signs are the same, for example, -6 plus -2, you're just going to keep it negative and add it up. That's like the big loser problem. You lost 6 and you lost. You kept losing, so you're a big loser. Now if the signs are different, like -6 plus 2, this is when they're fighting each other. 6 negatives are fighting against 2 positives. The negatives are going to win by 4. How did I get that? I subtracted, and just because there's more negatives, the answer was negative. Subtraction, the main point that I was trying to teach you is that you can rewrite a subtraction problem. I'll give you 2 examples here. You can rewrite any subtraction problem by making a double sign change. 1, 2. 1, 2. It doesn't matter. It won't change the answer. It's just a different way of looking at it. Some of you, I think I'm changing the problem totally. I'm just rewriting it in a different way. And then last, multiplying or dividing. If the signs are the same, it's always positive. If the signs are different, it's always negative. And that works for multiplication and division. So for example, -6 times -2, that's going to be a positive. And when you have one of each, that's always going to be negative. Unfortunately, some of you get your addition rules mixed up with your multiplication division rules, so you might need to spend a little time studying those, quizzing yourself. All right, then we got into Unit 3. Unit 3 was also a big unit. We started with number classifications. Remember this? Real. All numbers are real, and then they're either rational or irrational. Irrational were the really wild ones that went on and on forever and ever with no pattern. Rationals have patterns or can be written as fractions. Then you'd break that down into integers, and then you'd get more specific. Maybe they're whole numbers, and then maybe they're counting numbers. If you don't remember these, then maybe you need to go back and look them up or ask me. We then talked about changing integers to fractions. Any integer, like, for example, 7, you can write it as a fraction, 7 over 1. Decimals to fractions, if they terminate, for example, 2.3, that can be written as 2 3/10. You just look at the place value. If they repeat, for example, 3.71, that's 3 71 over 99. If they repeat, you have lots of 9s. If they terminate, you have 0s, 10s, hundreds, thousands. All right, I think you should know how to change back and forth from mixed to improper. You should know how to reduce. When you're comparing and ordering fractions, you should either rewrite them with common denominators or change to decimals. All right, fractions. Pretty big deal that you know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. So I'm going to quickly go through that. When you add or subtract, you need a common denominator. So here's an example. 1/8 plus 2/5. The common denominator is going to be 40ths. And remember, if you change the bottom of a fraction, you have to change the top. So since I changed 8 to 40, I had to multiply by 5. I have to multiply the top by 5. And to get from 5 to 40, I had to multiply by 8. So I have to multiply the top number by 8. And then you just add the top numbers. Because the bottom number just tells you how big the pieces are. They're 40ths. They're not very big. Multiplying. You don't need a common denominator. You do have to change mixed to improper. So 2 1/3 times 1 2/5. Change it to improper. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. You don't need a common denominator. You just multiply straight across. 7 times 7, 3 times 5. 49/15. And finally, division. You have to change it to improper first. So if I do 2 1/3 divided by 1 2/5, I change them to improper. 7/3 divided by 7/5. I keep the first fraction, I change it to times, and I flip the second fraction. Once it's times, once it's multiplication, I can cross cancel. That's 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom. And then I multiply straight across. And you get 5/3. All right, let's go to the last page, final page of the review video. All right, it takes us to Unit 4, where we learned how to add and subtract like terms. When you add and subtract, they have to be like terms. For example, 3x plus 8 plus 7x plus 2x squared plus 3. You can only add like terms. So 2x squared, there's nothing else like it. Like terms have to have the same exponents also. So 2x squared just stays 2x squared. You have a 3x and a 7x, so that gives me 10x. And then last, you have the 8 and the 3, and 8 plus 3 is 11, and that's it. You can't add any more. It can't go any further because there are no like terms. And another really big concept was distributive property. For example, 3 times the quantity 5x plus 6. You had to take that outside number and distribute, which means multiply it by everything inside the parentheses. So that'll give you 15x plus 18. Okay, in Unit 5, we solved equations, which was basically unwrapping. So I'll do an example here. Let's say we have 2 times the quantity of 3x plus 8 equals 6x plus 2x minus 10. All right, we drew a dotted line down through the equal sign, and this problem we need to distribute. On the other side, you have like terms and also a double sign change. All right, distributing, I'll get 6x plus 16 equals 8x plus negative 10. I have x's on opposite sides. I'm going to subtract 8x. And that's, some of you have a weakness there. You don't notice there's x's on opposite sides. You got to be very observant. That gives me negative 2x plus 16 equals negative 10. Now I unwrap. I subtract 16. That leaves me with negative 2x equals negative 26. And then the last step, divide by negative 2. And you get x equals negative 13. Okay, I'm going quick, but hopefully it's reminding you of things, and maybe you need to go back and re-watch some of my other videos or ask me some specific questions. All right, we also solved inequalities, which is basically the same thing, okay? But inequalities have those greater than or is less than, or sorry, it has the is less than or the is greater than symbols, or it might even have or equal to. And the key on this, very important that you remember, if you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, you'd have to flip the inequality. And it seems like we either missed that or forgot about it. So back in this previous example where I divided both sides by a negative, if that would have been one of those alligator symbols, I would have had to flip it over. All right, we talked about graphing. You should know when to make it hollow and when to color it in. And you should know whether to shade it to the left or to the right. And if you don't, then come ask me. And finally, we get to Unit 6. A couple key points. Unit rate means per 1. Ratios, you have to pay attention to what order you put it in, and you have to reduce. Equivalent rates, we did that unit analysis where we followed the units. And then finally, we wrote and solved proportions. When you write a proportion in A here, the units in the numerators have to match, and the units in the denominators have to match. For example, maybe you have 8 cats over 9 dogs. And if it's a proportion, it'd be equal. And on the other side, you're going to have cats and dogs in the same order. So 250 cats, and then maybe D dogs. Notice it matches cats over dogs, and a proportion has an equal sign in the middle. Now to solve a proportion, I'll do an example over here. Let's say we have negative 7 over x plus 4, and that equals 7 over 2. To solve a proportion, you cross multiply. And you set those equal to each other. So here we go. 7 times x plus 4 on the one side equals negative 7 times 2. Here I have to distribute. 7x plus 28 equals negative 14. Now I'm just solving. Subtract 28. 7x equals negative 42. And then last step, divide by 7, and you get x equals negative 6. Alright, this is a really fast review. If you need to ask me questions, please do. If you need to go back and rewatch it, or maybe go back and look up some other videos, please do that. On the following pages, you have suggestions of things to do to study, and you need to pick 1 or 2 or 3 of those and continue on studying for your exam. All right, good luck.